mentor lawyer in Tallahassee, Florida, with another video about the murder of Dan Markel case. Here I'm going to discuss my top 20 plus reasons why I think Wendi Adelson was involved in the murder of her ex-professor Dan Markel.
It was certainly not a celebration.
And you never heard your brother refer to it in that way?
No.
Were you involved in any way in a plot to kill Dan Markel?
No.
Do you have any knowledge other than the statements you said your brother made or the jokes your brother made? Do you have any knowledge of anyone being involved in a plot to kill your husband?
No.
As a former assistant statewide prosecutor and a former criminal defense attorney in Florida, who is covering the investigation into the murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel, I hold the opinion that Wendi Adelson, the ex-wife, knew that Dan Markel was going to be murdered and, at a minimum, played a small role in the conspiracy to commit the murder. I am not alone in this opinion. Just a few days ago, Sam Zangané, the attorney for the convicted hitman Sigfredo Garcia, who likely has a lot more information than I do about the case, because he was defending one of the defendants in a capital case, thinks that Wendi Adelson's biggest lie at trial when she testified was that she was not involved, or that she did not know that the murder was going to happen.
I mean, what do I think the biggest lie was? That she wasn't involved, or that she didn't know.
In evaluating the case, I prepared a list of evidence I have noticed thus far that supports the conclusion that Wendi Adelson was involved in the murder. Of course, we're talking about the murder of her ex-husband, Dan Markel, who was shot twice in the face in the driveway of his home as he returned from the gym by a hired hitman, like I said, Sigfredo Garcia, in July of 2014, about 1 year after Dan Markel's divorce from Wendi Adelson became final. If you know about the case, then you know that the couple still saw each other on occasion after the divorce because they had 2 kids together, 2 young boys, and because they had to exchange the kids, and also because they worked in the same place at the FSU College of Law. But the divorce was very acrimonious, to say the least, and there was still ongoing post-divorce, pretty nasty litigation between Wendi Adelson and Dan Markel at the time of the murder, including accusations by Dan Markel against Wendi Adelson of fraud in the court. It is pretty clear that at least one of the Adelsons, likely Charlie and Donna Adelson, actually ordered the hit, using Charlie's girlfriend, Catherine McBanua, as the intermediary, who in turn had the father of her kids, Sigfredo Garcia, and Sigfredo's best friend, Luis Rivera, carry out the hit for $100,000. But many believe that Wendi Adelson was involved, and so do I. Of course, whether this can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt is another matter, but here is the list of facts and evidence that I could think of and that support the conclusion that Wendi was involved in the murder. And by involved, again, I do not necessarily mean that she was a direct participant in hiring Katie and all of those things. I mean, it could be either direct or indirect participation, knowledge and assistance in the developing and the carrying out of the plot. So here is the list from the most important to the least important. Number 1, Wendi Adelson was the main beneficiary of the murder, and it is hugely unlikely that a family member of this tight-knit family would order the killing without her blessing, since the victim, after all, is the father of her children and her ex-husband.
Do you remember your mom suggesting a plan to offer Danny $1 million to allow the relocation of you and the children to South Florida?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
I'm sure I knew about it at the time that it happened, and then I had my memory refreshed about it recently.
Did you ever make the offer to Mr. Markel?
No.
Number 2, the emails from Donna to Wendi during the divorce proceeding that had lots of suggestions of what Wendi should do about Dan Markel shows that Wendi did not follow much of what the mom had asked her to do, and that therefore the ideas were coming from South Florida, but the decisions about what to do or not to do were made by Wendi, because after all, again, this was her husband / soon-to-be ex-husband and the father of her kids. Number 3, Wendi just could not shut up. She mentions on the day of the murder in the same morning to a guy from Best Buy the fact that Charlie had made a joke about hiring a hitman, but that instead, because it was too expensive, he bought her a TV. She also could not shut up and basically told Jeffrey Lacasse the same thing, even though not in a joking manner, according to Jeffrey Lacasse, a few days before. So, of course, this is very important, because you got to think about it this way. She's a lawyer, and you know that during the interrogation, on the day of the murder, she also mentions this fact to the investigator. So, you got to think about the fact that she's a lawyer, she's smart, and any good trial lawyer or person who studies to become a good trial lawyer or handles litigation would know that the lawyer should, in presenting a case to the jury or to whoever's going to be making decisions about a case, and in this particular case, it was the cops who were going to make a decision about whether to charge whom, right? You address all the negative facts up front so that you have a control of the narrative, so that you don't look so that you look credible to the jury, and so on and so forth. So I see this whole thing as an effort to lessen the impact of what was obviously known to a lot of people, that Charlie Adelson had made the joke, and I'm sure that Wendi Adelson had repeated that joke to many people, which probably was not a joke. So they were just handling that fact up front. And this was done right there immediately after the murder in the interrogation, which shows to me some level of preparation and anticipation and thinking about how to properly evade prosecution for this murder. Number 4, the timing of the hit. The fact that she was aware of his precise actions on the morning of the murder and was helping by keeping him distracted with all these communications back and forth, which she had delayed for days and days, about where one of the sons was going to be going to school in the fall. Number 5, and so let me go back to number 4. Obviously, that would be one more person ensuring that the two guys who were going to carry out the hit were not going to harm the kids. So she was very well aware of what's going on, and probably she could call it off by calling Charlie and letting him know, hey, listen, things are not working out, don't do it. Number 5, the fact that there were threats to her career ongoing in the post-divorce litigation, and that something happened in May. Well, here's what happened. Her deposition was going to be happening very soon, when she was going to be questioned about all this fraud and everything. And just a couple of months before the murder, the deposition at the last second gets canceled. How she basically gets her attorney to withdraw from the case, alleging a conflict of interest, and therefore causing a significant delay in the prosecution of the post-divorce litigation, which basically gave the time for the plot to be worked out and the murder to be carried out before any decisions were made and before she was put on the depositions and under oath to be questioned by Dan Markel's counsel about these accusations. Number 6, what I call her slow alibi to help misdirect the police. The fact that during the interrogation on the day of the shooting, I just got the impression that she did not want the cops to erase her completely as a suspect. She wanted them to waste some time on her as well. Because again, she knew that she wasn't the shooter. She knew that she had probably a more distant role in this. And therefore, I think that if you think about it, one of the ways that they're helping each other out in this case, the people who are involved, and let's assume for a second now that Wendi, Harvey, Donna, and Charlie were involved. It's possible that they all were. But by, for example, Wendi at the interrogation even pointing to the possibility that her parents did it or that Charlie did it, it makes the case a lot harder. You got four different people who had a motive and maybe even the opportunity to do all of this, right? And the cops would have to prove that all of them are involved or that just one is involved, and then that one who is accused then can point, well, why are you accusing me? Let's say it's Charlie, right? Why are you accusing me? It could have been Donna. Why it could have been Wendi? I mean, look, Wendi met with Katie just a few weeks before on the beach, and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is that they're kind of like all each other's alibi in a sense. And on the day of the interrogation, she sort of wanted to leave open the possibility that she was the shooter, because she knew that she wasn't. That's just the feeling that I got. Number 7, her efforts at misdirection during the interrogation. Again, this is related to what I just said, but with the misdirection, I mean not just with respect to herself and the other Adelsons who may have been involved. Of course, Robert Adelson has nothing to do with this, so I'm talking about the other ones, Charlie, Harvey, and Donna, and Wendi. So what I mean at misdirection is that there were other things that she was doing to point at other people who, you know, obviously that she was offering some crazy ideas about the boyfriend or the former husband of the current girlfriend of Dan Markel. She basically was offering up other suspects. And of course the cops were asking him for that information, but she was really going off on some weird tangents and saying that like a lot of her friends, you know, some of her friends might have done this for her. She interestingly did not directly want to bring up Lacasse. I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, she's been interrogated, she's been asked about who could have done this, right? And if she really was worried about Lacasse and just broke up with him because of his jealousy and all this stuff, and she really thought that he was a potential suspect, let's say that she was not involved, probably that his name would have come up. But I think that the way that it came up later through a friend, who Miss McPherson, who came into the interrogation, and then Wendi asked her who could have done this, and then of course McPherson says, well, what about Lacasse? And then you can find out, then you hear, if you hear the whole interrogation, you see that Wendi even admits that a couple of days earlier they went for a walk, Wendi and McPherson, and so Wendi was telling her all this bad stuff about Professor Lacasse. Likely, lies. Likely, Professor Lacasse was being made jealous on purpose. Likely, she wanted him to be the patsy. So, but there was a lot of effort during the interrogation at misdirection. And as we know, Professor Lacasse was later totally cleared from this, having nothing to do with it. But the murder was committed at the time that Professor Lacasse was supposed to be leaving town, and using a sedan of a similar color as Professor Lacaze's. Number 8 would be Wendy's failure to immediately contact the Markels. To me, this shows a person who does not have a heart, does not have compassion, does not have empathy for those people who are suffering, who would suffer the most by what was done here, right? The parents of this young man who loved them dearly and lost their child, their boy, their pride. The young man who worked really hard and went to Harvard and Cambridge and Harvard Law School and was working so hard to succeed and to make an impact. She doesn't seem to care about calling them. She's more worried about collecting information from the cops than about letting them know immediately about what's going on. Number 9, I would say, is related again to the interrogation of Wendi Adelson, but it is pretty clear to me throughout the interrogation that she was trying to collect information from the police as well, to ease their mind, right? To ease the mind of all of them who were involved, that they were not going to be caught, that Sigfredo Garcia got away with a clean slate, right? So that information would give him some peace of mind, and she was trying to get information, of course, number one and foremost, about whether the hit was a success and Dan Markel died, or how bad were the injuries, because Sigfredo Garcia did not hang around to see what happened. Number 10 would be the fact that she visited the scene of the murder within an hour after the murder and created an elaborate excuse as to why she had to drive by her ex-husband's house that morning. She basically went completely off of her way. She lives north from where Dan Markel lived, about 5 miles north. She had a lunch meeting in the northeast of the city, so she would have to drive down maybe 2 miles and then make a right turn and go another 2 miles to go to this restaurant. Instead, she drives south another 2-3 miles to go to an ABC liquor store completely off the way, which would make her go right in front of Dan Markel's house, where she's going to go and buy this ring bullet, which is another factor that I'll discuss here. So she goes completely off her way to go to the scene of the crime. And again, this to me is to collect information, to find out if there's a coroner's van or a dead body or whatever inside, what's going on in the house, was this a successful hit or not. So, and also maybe perhaps to, again, point us to her being a potential suspect of the actual shooting, so that cops waste time on her instead of the real killer, the real actual shooter, let's put it this way. Number 11 is her strange and, in my opinion, unprofessional behavior and actions during the interview with the police.
There was a shooting at your home, or your ex-husband's home, at 2116 Trescott. Okay. Your ex-husband, Daniel, all right, has been taken to the hospital. He's not going to survive. and so forth. Okay, and then once we've established all that, I can give you more details. Do you understand why I wanted you to come here before I discuss this?
On the day of the shooting. Considering that she's an experienced lawyer with a high level of education who attended really good institutions, who could someday become a judge, who worked constantly on projects involving victims of pretty horrific crimes and human trafficking, and then acting like she was acting at this interrogation is completely weird. And I'm just going to add to that several of her friends, it's really not related to this, but I'm just going to add it because I don't think I have it on the list. Several people close to her, right after in the early stages of an investigation, were suspicious of her and of the family. Let's put it that way. From my review of other interviews that I have not published. I think I'm going to go to number 12. Her avoidance of eye-to-eye contact with Dan Markel in at least 2 or 3 weeks prior to the murder. So basically, she was supposed to meet him at least twice, or she had an opportunity to meet him at least twice and see him face to face. But I think that her guilty conscience did not let her actually have eye-to-eye contact with him. So one, she was supposed to exchange the kids, and instead she let her parents meet with him and do the exchange. And in the other one, she almost ran into him while she was with the kids at a grocery store, and immediately she turned around and bolted away to avoid any contact with him. To me, that's evidence that here's somebody who knows that he's going to be killed, maybe is directly involved, and does not want to see him, does not want to change her mind because she sees him and talks to him, and she just basically wants to erase him from the picture. And the only time that she was actually also avoiding phone contact with him because they were supposed to talk about where one of the boys was going to be going to school. There was going to be a change of school because of his age. So she avoided contact, using the fact that she was sick as an excuse. And then suddenly, on the day of the murder, starts texting Dan Markel that, oh, we can meet later today. So basically, she was supposed to meet him around the time of the murder. So he's this whole time preoccupied with getting ready for this meeting with her. He's actually, at the moment that he's being shot, he's investigating the school that she's proposing. So after all this time that she was avoiding talking to him, exactly on the morning of the murder, gives her an excuse to have all information about his whereabouts that morning. She suddenly now wanted to talk and wanted to set up a meeting later that day. So that, to me, is also pointing at her. Number 13, her excusable communications all morning with Dan Markel, Charlie Adelson, and Donna Adelson. I already said about the fact that she was communicating with Dan Markel, but also that same morning, she was communicating with Charlie and Donna by phone. At least I remember Charlie. I'm not 100% sure about Donna, but I believe that Donna as well. And, the excuse about talking to Charlie was the fact that her TV, the famous TV that he was joking about, the Hitman or the TV before, that TV was supposedly being repaired. Which, by the way, that in itself is also another weird fact that may point to her involvement, because the whole TV being broken thing is very suspicious. Could have been done on purpose, all being a symbol. This lady apparently likes symbols. So that's my opinion. Of course, number 14 would be the whole timing of the breakup with Professor Jeffrey Lacasse. I'm curious whether law enforcement asked Luis Rivera, because I don't remember seeing this. It could be that I just missed it. I know that they asked him about the timing of the murder. Maybe he said that, we knew that he was going to be leaving town, so it had to be done that Friday. But what I'm more curious about is why it wasn't done before. Because this ties into the whole thing about setting up Professor Lacasse. The timing of this thing is so close to when he was supposed to be leaving town. And so I wonder if they had other opportunities to do it and it did not have the go yet. So that's something that they might want to follow up with Luis Rivera if they hadn't yet. Maybe they did and I missed it. Number 15, the meeting with Katie in South Florida. The thing about going to the beach with Katie, which Katie is somebody who probably is completely unlike what Wendi Adelson is like. They don't seem like a good match. Why would Wendi want to go to the beach with Katie and another friend?
Do you know Catherine Magbanua?
I have met her before.
How do you know her?
We met one time at dinner when I came home and my brother introduced me to her. And I think we might have gone to the beach once with her and a friend for a few hours.
I don't know. I think it's part of this whole plot. This happened in June 2014, just about a month before the murder. And another factor is that Wendi was in South Florida for quite a bit of time during that period, during that summer, especially in the weeks leading up to the murder. So that's part of it. That's part of the evidence. Number 16, I think I already mentioned this, so maybe it shouldn't be 16. But more specifically, let's make it just about this. It does appear that Professor Jeffrey Lacasse was being set up as a patsy. You have the whole breakup, the whole jealousy stuff that may have been forced. The whole thing about telling her friend McPherson that he was super jealous. The whole thing about her asking for him not to contact her for a few days before the murder. The timing of the murder, specifically the time to when Professor Lacasse was supposedly leaving town. He luckily left the night before without telling her. And the vehicle used. So since 16, and by the vehicle used I mean that the killers, what kind of killers would rent a Prius? My guess is that they were just told to get a sedan that looked a particular color. They went to off the shelf kind of, not a regular rental car company, but a little one. And they had Priuses, and so they got one that are of a similar color and rented it. So, okay, so 16, instead of being the setup of Professor Lacasse, will be related, because I already had mentioned the setup. So 16 will be the fact that a month earlier in June, I think it was June 4th, but during the first trip by Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia to Tallahassee to commit the murder, according to Professor Lacasse, Wendi was acting extremely weird, and she canceled future plans to go travel with him to see his family, to meet his family. So basically, as if she's expecting that the ex would be murdered, she would be moving to South Florida. So she's not gonna be spending much time with Lacasse anymore. Anyway, that's number 16. 17 is the fact that she, for the first time ever, talked to her two boys who are of young age about death just a couple of days before the murder of their father. So she's having a philosophical conversation with her two little boys about the meaning of death and their understanding of death. As a great coincidence, just a couple of days before the murder. Probably on that Wednesday, since she had them on that Wednesday. Number 18, during the interrogation on the day of the shooting, Wendi doesn't seem to make any arrangements for the cancellation of a babysitter for the kids. She does mention that she's supposed to go to a stock depart party. And so I don't have all the details. So of course I could be wrong about this, but if the police questioned the people who were throwing this party and asked her whether Wendi was expected to come with the kids, and the answer was yes, she was going to bring the kids, or she asked about bringing the kids and they said okay, or she usually brings the kids, that's one thing. But this seems to be a party where you're going to be bringing bourbon, you're going to be celebrating somebody's marriage or soon to be marriage. It doesn't sound like a party where you would want to be bringing your kids in. So if that was followed up and kids were not allowed, I didn't see anything in that interrogation about her trying to cancel on a babysitter or calling a babysitter explaining why the kids were not going to be there on time and so on and so forth, because the interrogation went past the time when the party was supposed to be starting. So number 19 is the fact that she bought a bourbon called Bullet, sounds like bullet, on the day of the shooting. Number 20, the fact that she moved to South Florida almost immediately after the murder, just within a few days, and also that she still allows the children to be with Donna, Charlie, and Harvey, because assume that for a second that she's not involved. She should know by now for sure that at least one of them ordered this hit. And yet, she with no problem has a good relationship, as she testified at the trial, with all of them and lets them see the kids. In fact, when she was testifying at the trial, Donna was taking care of the kids in South Florida. So that to me again points at the fact that these people were all doing this together. Number 21, the fact that she precludes all contact between the boys and the Markels, especially as they get older. Self-explanatory. That was maybe 21. Sorry, 21. So number 22, having lunch with two mental health professionals immediately after the murder takes place. Or while the murder is happening. So she has set up a lunch break, a lunch meeting with two friends who are in the mental health field, I think two doctors. And that to me, it's a little, could be pure coincidence again, but sounds more to me like somebody who's overthinking again about this whole plot and wants to have two very solid witnesses to say after the full investigation into her involvement, oh my gosh, no, she could not have been involved in this. She came to the lunch, she was happy, blah, blah, blah. What are you guys talking about? This is crazy. So that's not a very strong factor, but I put it on my list. Number 23, the fact that the money offered for the hit to the hitman team is about the same amount as what Dan Markel owed her from the divorce settlement that he was refusing to pay due to the allegations that she committed fraud. Eventually did collect. Number 24, this is probably the weirdest one of all, but the fact that she's wearing an owl t-shirt on the day of the shooting. Why is this evidence? Given the symbolism that I see behind, in the background, in a sense, of this murder, plus the fact that there was testimony that on this trip, I believe it was, Luis Rivera had taken a picture of an owl and then was told by Katie, or at least Katie told Sigfredo to tell Luis to remove it. So in the circles that were discussing the murder, there must have been the story about this shot of an owl. So maybe that gave her the idea, or maybe because she is very knowledgeable about trivia stuff. She participated in a TV show about trivia. Maybe she knew that an owl is an omen of death to come, and so she decided to wear an owl t-shirt. That to me is one more piece of evidence. Of course, I wouldn't convict her on the t-shirt only, but it's one more piece of evidence. I think the icing on the cake would have been if during the bump operation that happened in South Florida a couple of years later, that the FBI carried out to try to get these parties talking, the icing on the cake would have been if she had been mentioned as a participant. And I think the main reason probably why she will avoid prosecution, which is very possible, is the fact that during the bump and all the conversations that were recorded, there doesn't seem to be much of a mention of Wendi at all. And of course that doesn't mean that she wasn't involved. I think it's very possible that since she's the youngest child of this family unit, and she's the mom of the two boys, and because she was probably kept off in the distance in this plot and had more of an indirect participation. See, my guess is that these people were trying to justify to themselves everything that they were doing, and they were trying to deal with it ahead of time psychologically so that they could survive with the horrible decision that they made to kill another human being. So they are probably all telling themselves that Dan Markel did this to himself, that by his actions, by his litigiousness, by his accusations, by his narrow-mindedness in a sense of trying to, maybe even remove her Florida bar license, that he basically put a target on his head. And that it's not really their fault. It's really the fault of Dan Markel that he did this to himself, that he knew that he shouldn't be so horrible to such a nice human being like Wendi Adelson. And so, if Wendi Adelson was involved, which seems to me like she was, likely because of the fact that these people think of themselves as normal, nice, and good people, right? Likely, possibly. And they're trying to justify in their minds what they're doing. Likely her involvement again would have been indirect, would have been sort of talking like this: well, Wendi, would you be okay if something happened to your husband on such and such a date? Obviously you're not involved and you have nothing to do with this, but if somebody who loves you, I don't know whom, okay, there's a lot of people who love you, Wendi. If somebody were to do something, you think Friday morning, which day would be best? No. And again, you're not involved, but I'm just talking hypotheticals here. That's kind of how it might have been done. Maybe they just talked about, hey, let's kill this sucker or whatever. But anyway, so that's it. That's my list. I got 24 items. The last one is the owl shirt, of course. The good old owl shirt. I'm sure I missed a few, and I hope that you're going to help me by putting them in the comments and below, and that you like this video, and that I'll see you next time. I intended to do this one as a very short video with a short list of items, but as you can see, there's a lot of detail that needed to be explained, so that's my list. And keep in mind, in our judicial system, it is a court of law and the jury that gets to decide who's guilty and who's not guilty. It's not me, it's not the investigators, it's not even the prosecutor. So let justice play out. Obviously Wendi was complaining about the fact that she gets death threats. That's obviously wrong. Nobody should do that, and the purpose of this video is simply to provide you with my analysis as a former prosecutor and defense attorney of the evidence. Thanks for watching. Until next time, Mentor Lawyer.
Now, You are testifying today under a state subpoena, correct?
Correct.
And that state subpoena gives you immunity for your testimony, right?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury, since you're an attorney, what immunity is?
Immunity is freedom from prosecution.
So that means that anything you say today can't be used against you if the state decides to arrest you later on.
The state isn't going to decide to arrest me.
Do you know if they consider you a suspect?
I don't know.